To make a long story short, no. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna be talking about if Benjamin Moore paint is worth the hype. For those of you that don't know, Benjamin Moore is like the Rolls Royce of paints. It's used a lot by interior designers because of the overall quality of the paint and its wide selection of beautiful colors. It's supposed to have really great coverage, which means less coats of paint and a thicker overall consistency. So why did I use Benjamin Moore? The project that I used this on was for kitchen cabinets. I'm working with a budget, so I usually go with less expensive paint like Valspar or Behr, but because the cabinets get used so much, I wanted to ensure that I was doing it properly. I didn't want the cabinets to look all ratchet because they get used so often and then I would have to go and repaint the shit later. I just wanted to do it one time. So I bit the bullet a little bit on the cost with this one. So how did I prep? So paint is only as good as the way that you apply it. Meaning if you paint it like crap, you're going to get exactly that. I'm very aware of that, so for this project, it was important to me to not cut any corners. The first thing I did was apply a degreaser because I didn't want gunk or grease to be left over on the painting surface. If you leave grease and gunk and all kinds of stuff on your painting surface, it impacts the adhesion with the paint. So I was trying to avoid that. After all of that, I removed all of the hardware and again made sure that there was no leftover residue. If I was dealing with solid wood cabinets, the next thing I would have done was sand the surface, but because I was dealing with laminate, that wasn't an option. When you're painting a surface, one of the things to consider is that some materials are more porous than others. So if you're painting on something like solid wood, like mahogany, cherry wood, pine, anything like that, it's gonna be a lot more porous. But I was painting on laminate, which is nice because it absorbs virtually nothing. This meant that theoretically, I didn't have to use as much paint. After that, I used the Kills 2 all-purpose primer and I primed the hell out of everything. I primed all of the nooks and crannies and made sure that everything dried evenly and had full coverage. I also made sure to let it dry for 2 days before I painted on it because I didn't want the primer to be wet and then put wet paint on it. Again, I was trying to avoid any adhesion issues. After the primer dried, I made sure to sand off any little drips that had formed while I was priming. Then I removed all of the cabinet doors and the hinges. I wanted to paint everything separately because when you're painting with the hinges on, it's virtually impossible to paint around and you just end up getting paint everywhere and it just looks bad. I've tried painting with doors on and it doesn't end up well. After I took the doors off, when I laid them down, I made sure just to paint the inside of them and then I went to reattach the doors to paint the outside because I didn't want any paint that wasn't fully dried to be lying on something and create a crease. I went out and I got brand new brushes because again, I didn't want to cheap out on this project. I didn't want to buy cheap brushes that would make expensive paint go on like anyways. So after all of that was done, it was finally time to paint. Then I went to Benjamin Moore and I selected a paint. They showed me 3 different kinds of paint. The first one was a cheaper, more baseline paint that they had for cabinets. The second one was a more advanced, better coverage paint. And the third one was also a more advanced, better coverage paint, but specifically geared towards darker colors. So I landed on the second one, the more expensive paint that had ensured better coverage. And because I was painting with a lighter color, it just made sense to get the second more expensive one. Which, mind you, the baseline paint is still quite a bit more expensive than your average hardware store cabinet paint. So at this point, I thought to myself, great, I prepped everything, I didn't cut any corners, I'm ready to paint, everything's gonna go right. Wrong. When I started painting, I noticed that I could immediately see through the paint. I've never experienced this before, so I thought it was a little bit unusual. I mean, to give you a reference point, the primer did more coverage than the actual paint did. And primer's supposed to be thin in consistency. So I just finished putting on the single coat on everything, and then I just let it dry overnight in hopes that it might come up a little bit less sheer. So when I came back the next day, everything had dried, but the coverage was still the same. So I proceeded to put on a second coat, a third coat, a fourth coat, and midway through the 5th, I ran out of paint. Around coat 3 was when I just said, screw it, and I just started to, I you not, take the can of paint and just dump it onto the surface and then slosh it around with a brush in hopes that it might give it some kind of coverage. And you could still see the brown wood color underneath it. I mean, this is what it looks like after 4 coats. That's again with primer and paint. And you can still see through it. So at this point, I'm giving up on Benjamin Moore. I'm frustrated as hell and I just want to be done with it. So I went online to seek validation and confirm that I wasn't just missing something. And this is what the good people of Reddit had to say. The best solution is to not use Benjamin Moore paint. It dries way too fast, is way too thin, and doesn't cover, and requires more than 2 coats on a cream colored wall. Took 3 coats to cover primer. I will never touch Benjamin Moore paint ever again. I have seen lots of people raving about Benjamin Moore paint, and this is my first time and my last time ever painting with Benjamin Moore paint. Another person said, it won't even cover over itself and your cut lines flash through the overlap, so you absolutely need another coating. Lastly, longtime painter. There's not much you can do other than tint your primer to the same color. Even then though, the cut is always faded for at least 3 cuts. Aura is definitely more about the color richness than anything else when I try to sell it. Regal tends to cover better, but if you're looking for something that most contractors are using from Benjamin Moore, I'd go Scuffix. At this point, it's looking like professional painters are doing what I was about to do next, which was to use the Benjamin Moore color and color match it to a paint that I already knew worked. It seems like the problem with Benjamin Moore is its lighter colors. I've never used their darker colors, so I can't really pass judgment about their darker color coverage. But I wasn't working with dark colored paint, so for my purposes, it just didn't work. So the solution was I just decided to throw in the towel and buy what I knew worked, which was Valspar. So I went to Lowe's and I bought their more expensive cabinets and furniture paint, which was still cheaper than the baseline Benjamin Moore paint, which, remember, was worse than the paint that I purchased. You can go to Lowe's and Home Depot and have them color match the paint that you need. Whether this be bringing in a paint chip from a project you're working on or giving them the name of a paint from a competitor brand, which is what I did. I just went into Lowe's, I explained my problem, and one of the Valspar reps looked up the color Bavarian Cream by Benjamin Moore and had it color matched and made for me right then and there. So I went home and I began painting with the Valspar on the cabinets that only had primer on them, and just like I thought, after 2 coats, it was completely covered. Look at the difference. This was 4 coats of Benjamin Moore versus 2 coats of Valspar. So would I recommend Benjamin Moore? For lighter colors, no. Again, I've never used it for darker coverage, so I can't make recommendations or discourage anyone from purchasing their darker color paints. But for lighter color projects, I don't think it's worth the hype. I don't know if Benjamin Moore is going to hold up better in the long run, considering the fact that that's one of the things that they're known for. But I've also never had problems with Valspar keeping in shape, so I can't justify choosing Benjamin Moore over Valspar for this. That's not to say I wouldn't ever use Benjamin Moore paint again, but with the project that I was doing, it just was not good. Thanks for watching, guys. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please make sure to like and subscribe. Follow me along while I renovate my boyfriend's place so that I can move in. If you'd like to receive notifications for when I post new videos, just feel free to hit that little ding button. Bye!